Tonight on Mississippi Insight, coronavirus in the White House. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania test positive for the virus. Tonight, what that means for the highest levels of government and for the presidential race going forward. And Governor Tate Reeves, who was at the White House earlier this week, we hear from him. Good evening, I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. The news came out early Friday. The President and First Lady announcing positive test results on Twitter. They were tested after Senior Advisor Hope Hicks reported her positive test earlier in the day. Well, the President has since canceled all in-person campaign events. The Vice President will continue to campaign. Members of the President's family, including daughter Ivanka, son Barron, and son-in-law Jared Kushner, have tested negative. Former Vice President Joe Biden, who was on the stage with the President at Tuesday night's debate, also tested negative, along with his wife, Dr. Jill Biden. Governor Tate Reeves was at the White House earlier this week on Monday for an event to discuss COVID-19 testing. He talked with Y'all Politics on Friday.
Let me first say that Ely and I and our entire family, on behalf of all 3 million Mississippians, are praying for President Trump and for our First Lady. We know that this virus is real and it treats different people in different ways, but we're certainly praying that God looks over the President and the First Lady, and hopefully throughout this country, we can put politics aside and all agree that we want the President to do well through this and get better. You know, as I look at my time spent in Washington on Monday, I have been tested pretty regularly for COVID-19 over the last 8 months, quite honestly, including earlier this week. If you look at my day in Washington, I spent the vast majority of my time with Vice President Pence, the coronavirus task force. We obviously spent a little bit of time with the President, but it was at the press conference in an outdoor venue in which very, very strict protocols were maintained with respect to the President and social distancing. And so I feel fine right now, feel great, and don't have any reason to believe that under current protocols that it would be necessary for me to self-quarantine. I've done it before, and should that become necessary, I'll certainly do so. But we are praying for the President and Melania.
And his family, the First Lady, and all those who have contracted the virus. You know, he's out in the public eye quite a bit. He's shaking hands. He's talking to people. He's on the campaign trail. The likelihood of him contracting this illness, unfortunately, was very high. He has worn a mask. He has tried to social distance, but in the role he's in, especially during a very hotly contested campaign cycle, the ability for him to contract this virus or the likelihood was there. But, you know, the thing is now is to make sure that he medicates and he stays quarantined, just like he's told everyone else throughout the country, just to get better. And it seems like so far, based on reports, his symptoms are very mild, which is good. And I would expect the President, who is in very good tip-top shape and health, and his wife to recover pretty quickly. I don't think that we will not see the President. I think he will continue to be very active on social media. I would expect his campaign and his administration to continue to have him at the forefront of all that is done and said. You know, our technology is such that we can be connected at a drop of a hat. So I would fully expect him to continue to be engaged in some levels. The debate is a couple of weeks off, so I would fully expect that to continue at this juncture. Of course, if the symptoms get worse or if other people will catch the virus, if it's determined that perhaps, you know, during that debate, other ones have tested positive, then there could be some effect on that. But right now, I would fully expect the debates to go forward.
And we'll be right back. Joining us now to talk about the President's diagnosis and the potential impact on the presidential race, the political expert from Millsaps College, Dr. Nathan Schroeder, head of the American Studies Department. Dr. Schroeder, let's get on a scale of 1 to 10. How seismic is this news with the President having coronavirus?
Well, look, I think that the news is I would put it at an 8 or a 9. And the reason, Byron, that I don't put it at a 10 is because I'm simply perplexed that it hasn't happened already. And I hate to say that, but the president has behaved in a very nonchalant manner about this, going back to March when the coronavirus started to spread in the U.S. And it felt inevitable that the way he exposed himself publicly without a mask and without social distancing for months now, I suspected this was going to happen. I didn't suspect that this was going to happen with only 30 some days left before the election takes place. But I would say this is an 8 for me, only because I thought this would have happened by now.
Yeah, they always say there's an October surprise. Is this one of the October surprises?
Well, it could be. And let me say this about the October surprises. I actually had a discussion about this concept in a presidential elections course that I'm teaching this semester. Earlier in the week, I was explaining what that term really had meant in the past. And the concept of the October surprise maybe is a little different than it was even 4 years ago, when the October surprise really was with 10 to 12 days left before the election, James Comey reopening that investigation into Hillary Clinton's email account. But because so many Americans, or more Americans than ever, are voting early, whether it's by absentee ballot, by in-person absentee ballot, early voting, mail-in voting, drop box voting, that the later October surprises that we maybe were used to in previous campaigns may not have the same impact that, say, an early October surprise like this one might.
Does this change how the White House will handle the coronavirus going forward?
Wow, I don't know. And Byron, I hope so. I think, again, that just what we see from the White House, the constant stream of photographs of visitors, dignitaries, other politicians flowing in and out of the White House and the Oval Office without masks and very, very little, if any, social distancing happening. Also at the president's press conferences and things, no social distancing is not happening. We saw in August all those Republican Party officials on the lawn of the White House without masks and distancing. This may finally cause them to start approaching this with a more serious tone. But I'm just not sure yet, because this is still unfolding around this. But it makes one think that they're going to have to take this more seriously internally, but also externally, where, again, they've been very slow to embrace social distancing, masks, and all the other things that folks know they need to be doing.
How likely is this to spread amongst the highest levels of the government in the White House, at the Capitol, and how will it change how the government operates and functions?
That's the $1 million question. We just saw a little while ago that the Vice President Biden apparently has tested negative. They ran tests on him apparently today after the disclosure about the president. TheHill.com, the newspaper in Washington, D.C., reported a few hours ago that the Biden campaign and Vice President Biden was, as well as Chris Wallace, the Fox News moderator, they were all very close to President Trump for an extended period of time at that debate on Tuesday night. And I wonder about people like Chris Wallace and whether he's being tested. I'm, Byron, honestly, also concerned about the health and safety of Judge Amy Coney Barrett, who was with the president just throughout the week, was on Capitol Hill meeting with senators from the president's party this week. I hope that she and her family are safe, but I also am concerned that the nominee for the Supreme Court is also at risk at this stage. Physically at risk, that is.
How does this change the campaigning going forward? The president has canceled the personal visits while Vice President Joe Biden is keeping this campaigning. How is this going to change things going forward?
Well, it changes some things immensely. We know Donald Trump loves the face-to-face campaign and the big rallies, the crowds. We only have 30 some days left before the election, and Donald Trump is going to spend 14 days in quarantine. And that means there's no large rallies. The ones that they've already been planning are going to be either postponed or canceled. He's not going to, this is another critical part, Byron, that we've been reading in the past couple of weeks, that Joe Biden not just closed the fundraising gap with Donald Trump, but Joe Biden had overtaken him. Donald Trump, if he's stuck in the White House for 14 days, cannot do any in-person, face-to-face fundraising. Maybe he'll be making phone calls for that, but he can't go out on the road and raise money from high-dollar contributors this way. And I'll tell you that there's a huge impact that I see here. I don't necessarily think this, again, makes any Donald Trump voter defect to Joe Biden. But what this does is it has a direct negative impact on Donald Trump's brand. Because Donald Trump's brand throughout his administration, throughout his career, but especially throughout the coronavirus situation, the coronavirus crisis, he has been attempting to project toughness, right? And that has been his objective the whole way through. That's part of why he's refused to wear masks in public. And here his brand essentially was built around this toughness that he had. And now here he is sick with the coronavirus and is off the campaign trail for 14 days. So it makes a difference from my perspective in the way in which he has built up his own brand in this campaign, because now voters are seeing that brand was highly imperfect, and it was a flawed brand because the president is now sick.
How important is the tone going forward, particularly for the Biden campaign, when it comes to whether they attack the president who is now sick with the virus, or do they change the messaging going forward while he is quarantined?
Look, I don't think it would be appropriate for the Biden campaign to attack the president for being sick. Let me make that clear. And Vice President Biden, the statement he released on behalf of both himself and Dr. Jill Biden, sending their best wishes to the president, and that was very important. This can't be a personal attack on the president, but what it can do, it needs to do two things. They need to encourage people to to pray for the president and keep him in their thoughts, but they also need to remind people that the recklessness of the Trump administration's COVID-19 response has not only wreaked havoc on the country economically and the amount of people who are sick from this, or have died from this, but need to point out that Joe Biden had been setting a better example all along by wearing a mask publicly for months since this started, since March, for social distancing and encouraging all those practices that they don't even need to say that at this point. The public knows that because Donald Trump in the debate Tuesday attacked Joe Biden for wearing a mask. Donald Trump attacked Joe Biden for being careful. And now we see the candidate who is following the guidelines, being careful, showing restraint, tested negative. The candidate who's been reckless in that behavior has tested positive. So I don't think the Biden campaign needs to even mention that. But they cannot stop talking about the fact that the coronavirus crisis has wreaked havoc on the economy, and it's cost many people their lives and made many even more sick.
What impact does this have on the confirmation process for the Supreme Court? I know that had been the focus. Now it's on coronavirus. Does this help with the confirmation process for them pushing it through, or does this make it harder to push it through?
Well, it's unclear to me exactly what effect it'll have on the confirmation process, because I imagine right now that any senators who, of course, are the ones to vote on the confirmation, that any of them who maybe have been around the president or even near the nominee in the last couple of days, they may be sick. And I'm assuming they're all being tested now. So that, whether we might have members of the Senate in quarantine for 14 days takes them out of being able to vote on a nominee. And Mitch McConnell needs every single vote possible in his caucus to get that through. So that's one thing. The other thing is just, you mentioned coronavirus, of course, now is back as the chief headline, even though it rarely went away. That does not help Donald Trump politically, because the polling shows that a weak spot for Donald Trump throughout this entire process, this entire campaign rather, has been his handling of the coronavirus. And now what is the lead story all over the world is not just COVID-19 in the United States, which was handled poorly and exploded in a different way, more severe than other countries like ours. But not only is it that, but the president himself has it. So that keeps the story alive, keeps it even further up people's, on the list of things on their mind. COVID-19 remains there because now is directly linked to the thing they're going to hear about every day for 14 days. President Trump's infected and he's in quarantine.
Big picture here going forward, what do you see happening over the next 2 weeks when it comes to debating? I know there's been talk about maybe doing a virtual debate. How do you think that would look like if the president's up to debating again?
Honestly, I can't imagine the president agreeing to that. Because for one thing, the president was already skeptical of some of the changes that the debate commission had been discussing over the past few days about the greater ability to mute microphones, to move the candidates even further apart, to prevent talking over one another and interference. I can't imagine that he would agree to do a debate virtually because there would be even more controls, right, over the microphone usage, over speaking time, things of that nature. So any debates planned in the next 14 days, I don't see it happening. And for another reason, Byron, is not just that the president likely would object to that format. We just don't know what the president's health picture looks like right now and what that's going to look like in the next 14 days. And so I think it would be very hard for his campaign to commit to a virtual debate of any kind, not knowing what toll this is going to take on the president physically. That would just be a irresponsible thing to commit to right now because they simply don't know what this is going to look like in the Oval Office or in the White House or with him and his family. And so that's where I suspect we're going to have the Mike Pence, Kamala Harris debate. Imagine that the debate commission will try to keep the third and final debate on the calendar, but I don't have high expectations for this second debate happening in person at all, but I don't suspect that it would be held remotely or digitally.
All right, Dr. Nathan Schroeder, good talking to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we'll be right back. The president's diagnosis is prompting reaction from Mississippi congressmen and women. 12 News' senior political correspondent Gerald Harris reports.
What we have learned during this pandemic is that no one, no matter socioeconomics, age, or race, COVID-19 does not discriminate. And now the leader of the free world is experiencing the result of the novel coronavirus.
Arguably, the world's most protected figure has COVID-19, the virus that has claimed over 200,000 lives in the U.S., including 3,000 deaths in Mississippi.
I think I got the text at 1:16 a.m. You know, it's sad that it's happened, but so many Americans have gone through it.
From Representative Benny Thompson, who tweeted, quote, praying for President Trump and his wife, adding, this pandemic is not a hoax, wear a mask. To Representative Michael Guest, who tweeted in part, our first family, like our nation, is strong, and I will continue to pray for a speedy recovery. Reaction to President Trump's condition has been swift. He is now quarantined with the First Lady, Melania Trump. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith says she knows the president will still be able to fulfill his duties.
We all know the energy level of this president and how he has had the stamina that he has had has been incredible, but there will not be anything undone.
President Trump has held maskless events and has even criticized his opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden, for wearing a mask, which science supports aids in lowering transmission of the virus.
And Senator Roger Wicker is responding to the news, tweeting, Gil and I are praying for the president and the first lady. We hope they continue to feel well and recover quickly. And Mike Espy, who is running against Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, also tweeted in part, quote, wishing them a quick recovery. Back to you.
Mississippi Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann had his bout of coronavirus during the legislative session, along with several other members, including the Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn. The Lieutenant Governor is now reacting to the president's diagnosis.
The president's COVID is not as severe as mine or worse. It would be very difficult. That does not mean that he will be debilitated intellectually, but physically the fatigue factor was debilitating.
Well, he's warning Mississippians to take the necessary precautions in fighting back against COVID-19. And we'll be right back. Thanks to Frank Corder and Dr. Nathan Schroeder for joining us. Join us next week for another edition of Mississippi Insight. Until then, make it a good night.